Welcome to Mintel's Little Conversation podcast.
Hello and welcome to Mintel's Little Conversation, where our experts bring you fresh ideas and new perspectives on how consumers eat, drink, shop, groom and think. I'm Andrew McDougall, and today it's a bit of a different one. It's a festive podcast, a holiday podcast, because we are looking to wrap up season 3. And indeed, this year, 2021, is coming to a close. So we're having this festive wrap-up podcast, and I'm joined by fellow hosts today. So I'd like to welcome Alicia to the fold. Welcome, Alicia, all the way out in Australia.
Hello, yes, all the way out. It's late at night for me here, so thank you very much for having me, and forgive me if I say some weird stuff throughout the podcast.
It's the point of a festive podcast, I believe.
Excellent. It's so close to Christmas.
Other end of the spectrum, other side of the planet, and other side of the day as well. Here we have Andrew, as you'll all remember Andrew from his silky tones on the podcast. So welcome, Andrew.
Hello, welcome. Always a pleasure, Andrew. Always a pleasure.
And then also finally, last but by no means least, we have Sam, who is also in the UK along with me. I've made that a little bit more underwhelming, Sam, but you're still just as welcome. So welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Hello, and happy to be benefiting from the nice midday time point.
Exactly. Me and Sam are probably the freshest here today, so all the pressure's on us, really.
Yeah.
But as this is a sort of a festive wrap-up holidays podcast, I thought we'd start talking each, or bringing to the table each, a topic that we're interested in or intrigued or excited about from this year, or indeed looking forward to next year, those sort of developments that we'll see. I'm also then going to have a small data quiz to wrap up the year as well. We are a data company, so I'll be testing all your knowledge with some not necessarily festive themed data points, but hopefully it'll be some good talking points for us. But yeah, indeed, we've all brought to the table, I hope, one topic that we can discuss today from this year, looking forward to next. So who wants to go first? Andrew, are you keen to take this on?
Yes, I am, Andrew. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, buy now, pay later, of course, was a huge theme in 2021. And of course, we saw across the globe, companies like Klarna, Affirm, Afterpay experiencing incredible growth. In fact, actually, if we go back, I actually hosted a podcast back in 2020 with Thomas Slide and Mark Miller. And we talked about buy now, pay later and how it was like the right product for the right time. And of course, 2021, it really sort of appeared to be the case. But we just, in the US, we just had, we had Thanksgiving, we just had Black Friday and Cyber Monday, the big shopping days. And it was just fascinating because we saw the CEO of PayPal came out and said that buy now, pay later was basically the star of the shopping season so far. They experienced 400% growth. They had 750,000 transactions in just one day. He actually referred to November and said that, they're now up to 10 million consumers who've used PayPal's pay in 4 buy now, pay later products. But this kind of just got me thinking. So when I'm intrigued and thinking about 2022, it just makes me wonder, is this the first indicator of a buy now, pay later bubble? That could burst in 2022. Obviously, we've already seen the UK government clamping down on buy now, pay later. We like to follow NYU professor Scott Galloway, and he referred to buy now, pay later as simply a loan rebranded for debt-averse millennials. Anyway, so we'll see. Certainly in the US, supply of credit is on the rise. We're seeing consumers spending more. I think the next step to that, of course, is an increase in demand for credit. So credit is on the rise. These buy now, pay later products are getting more and more popular. Of course, it encourages consumers to spend more. So will it be buy now, pay later? Do you like that? Do you see what I did?
I do like that as well. Yeah. Is this just all part of just like one vicious cycle now as well, though, where it's kind of like you mentioned bubbles there, and it's kind of like is that just essentially what it is? We're just going through this cyclical nature of we do this, and then it reaches a breaking point, and then it's kind of crashes massively, and we're all in a bit of trouble, and then it carries on again. It's almost like do we learn from these experiences?
Well, that's a great point. I think it's all accelerated, right, by the type of the media landscape that we live in. It's easier to create these bubbles, perhaps, because certainly with these buy now, pay later products, of course, they are heavily driven by influencer marketing, by social media marketing. So it creates this sort of environment around it. And it's similar to some of the other trends that we see, of course, that create, a trend can catch get some wind behind it and sort of set sail and create these bubbles perhaps a little bit more easily. So I think that's an interesting point.
I just wanted to ask, did we see it facilitate more purchases over those holiday periods, or bigger value purchases as well?
Well, yeah. I mean, and that is the big claim, of course, is that, the pitch to, of course, retailers, and of course you're in Australia, which is where this all started, right? This is with Afterpay. So, I think obviously the pitch to retailers that you increase the purchase because you have this accessibility to installment financing right there at the point of sale. You have younger consumers who don't want to use credit cards find this sort of method of payment, very appealing. Of course, the downside, of course, is that it does encourage you to spend more perhaps than you would typically spend. And at the end of the day, it is credit. So no matter how much you sort of brand it and package it up and get influencers to market the product, it is credit, and you've got to pay it back.
That's tough because it's more accessible almost than credit as well. It's right there. Or is it actually? It feels like it is to me.
Oh, of course. Yeah, it's right there at the point of sale, at the checkout online, or even now at the checkout in store. So I think it's you buy now, pay later, but you have to pay. And so that is that's the key point, right? So yeah, I mean, that's how I think perhaps there's a bubble. We'll see. Perhaps this time next year, we'll see how it's played out. But certainly, I think it will be an interesting one to watch in 2022.
Do you think this is like a developing culture from the last sort of year, 18 months as well, with everything that's been going on globally from the pandemic, obviously, and things like that, but where we have got in a situation where sort of bailouts and furlough schemes and all these sort of ways of helping out has also come into play. So it's almost like you say, it's not free money. Of course, you do have to pay it back, but it's almost... Does that fit into that narrative around buy now, pay later as well? As in, like, this is something that helps you out now, but you do still have to pay that back later. Are we getting into just that culture as a society?
Well, yeah, I mean, effectively it is from the consumer side. Of course, it is free in the sense that you get to pay, and you don't have to pay any interest or charges. The retailer pays the charges, but of course, if you miss a payment, then you do start paying late fees, and that's where it can really get you into trouble.
That's a really nice positive point to end on as well, I think, before we move on to the next topic. And the next topic, I'm going to go to Alicia. And I've seen a short summary of what you want to talk about, Alicia, and it is the climate. So I'm not sure this is going to get any more positive.
It's probably not going to get...
Alicia, what's your key sort of intriguing talking point from this year, looking forward to next as well?
Yeah, I guess what I'm really looking forward to seeing. So over the past few months, we've been working on the global consumer trends, and I've been off the back of that rather immersed in the world of sustainability. So specifically consumers' understanding of climate change and of carbon emissions. So my thing that I'm really keen to see play out over the next year is how brands tackle carbon reduction and how they communicate those targets, their emissions, all of it to consumers. So now that COP26 has finished, and everyone, I guess, around the world, we all saw that play out. And countries, they've all set their targets. Consumers are going to be really focusing on what that means for all of them. What part do they have to play? And how do they mitigate their own impact? And how do they even understand what constitutes their own carbon footprint? Understanding emissions is pretty difficult, to be honest. It's really tough. What is a metric ton of carbon emissions? I have no idea what that means. So I'm keen to see what language brands will be using, storytelling techniques to help consumers understand and put into perspective what their impact will be and how they'll make it relevant to them. What are the metrics they use to help them understand and compare products? I think it's just such an open space at the moment that it's really up to brands how they want to tell those stories and communicate the changes that they're making to consumers to bring them along on this carbon reduction journey with them.
Yes, that's interesting. It's like here in the US, there's a financial company, a fintech called Aspiration, which is all focused on fighting climate change. And it's interesting you bring up that idea of like what do you use to measure that? Well, a few weeks ago, they launched a credit card where they will plant a tree for every purchase. And they basically are saying that if you make 30 purchases, they've calculated that will neutralize your carbon footprint. So to your point about, well, how do we measure this? They've said, well, actually 30 trees will neutralize your carbon footprint. So after that, you unlock 1% cash back. So it's the aspiration zero credit card. So it's a really interesting concept. And they're not the only ones doing it. I noticed up in Canada, there's a prepaid card that's doing this, planting trees to offset your carbon footprint. So I guess that's one way that they're doing it in financial services.
I've seen one in the UK that's literally a wooden card that they send out to you. So it's made of an actual tree, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Instead of plastic.
Yes. And we've seen recycled plastic cards as well.
Yes.
That seem to be getting more popular.
Not about kind of carbon footprint or anything, but one brand that I really like from a beauty perspective is a brand called Stop the Water While Using Me, which I just think is a really great concept of just simplifying the message. It's like, we're going to do loads of great stuff. I think they donate to water charities and, do all sorts of good stuff themselves as a brand, but kind of put some of that onus back on the consumer to do something and take a bit of action as well. And that puts some imperative on them. When you're using this product, you also have to be mindful of what you're doing. So I think that's one of my favorite examples, kind of on that note of just simplifying that message for consumers as much as possible.
And I think that's the key as well, is simplify the message, to provide clarity on what the message is. It's not to dumb anything down. It's not to treat people like they're silly, but we do need to simplify these messages because like you mentioned as well, Alicia, the language that's used, I struggle with, carbon itself, when you're talking about carbon neutral, carbon positive, carbon negative, carbon this, it's very difficult to know exactly what all these different things mean when it's plastered on a product. You kind of think, okay, that's probably a good thing, but I don't necessarily actually know what that actually means. So I think simplifying is really the key message for consumers. Also as well, because consumers aren't silly, once they get into more involved in this and more informed in this, I think consumers are going to realize again that although they can still make the change and they want to make the change, they're going to then want to see the simplified message from brands as to what they're doing, because ultimately that's going to be the big movement. That's going to be the big thing that changes. Like when we saw with the plastic bag or the plastic straw initiatives that have happened over the last few years, it's great to see how people change behavior. But at the same time, you also realize that that's a drop in the ocean of what can actually impact a sustainable movement on the planet. So it then gets put back on the brand. So I think there's going to be a lot more of this two-way conversation that I think brands and consumers need to be prepared to have.
I was going to say, I like it when I see the product or the brand sort of connecting the behavior with the cause. In other words, you don't have to sort of make a deliberate attempt to try and fight the cause. You can actually, it's embedded in the behavior. And what I mean by that is, for example, with that same product aspiration, they will give you extra cash back when you shop at certain companies that already have sustainable policies. Well, as a consumer, you're motivated to get the cash back and you're motivated to get the cause. So the behavior and the cause are kind of aligned. I think that makes it much more, to your point about the message, Andrew, that makes it a lot more simple to try and, rather than trying to evaluate any trade-off. Well, I'm not going to get my rewards, but I'm going to go and help the environment. Well, we want everything, right? We want our cake and eat it.
And consumers then are incentivized to learn which retailers, which brands are actually on that list of companies that are doing a good job, and where they can get that money back from, that cash back. So yeah, you're right. They learn as they kind of go as well, which I think is really interesting. I love what you said before, Andrew, that consumers aren't silly. They're learning really quickly, and it's a lot to take on. But if other brands are teaching consumers what to do and what to look for, then the ones that aren't kind of communicating correctly are going to be left behind as well, I think.
Yeah, indeed. I think that's a really key point. And I'm really glad as well that you've brought this topic to this podcast, because it is a really important, I think, topic given the COP26 just happening. And obviously for the next year, it's going to be really exciting to see those developments. I think that's a really good topic, much as Andrew's was before, to talk about in terms of what we're seeing now and also how that's going to be a big impact in 2022. So it'll be really interesting to see that. I also love as well, I didn't address this at the start, but obviously having two Andrews on the call can make it difficult then when you say Andrew. But the one really good thing,
we do that just to make life interesting.
But the one really good thing about that is when Alicia says, "You made a really good point, Andrew," we can both take the credit for that. I love that.
In a way,
I was nodding,
did.
yeah.
You both did.
So moving on then to our third topic, which I'm also very keen to hear more about then from Sam. What topic is it that you're sort of bringing from 2021, looking ahead for 2022 as well?
Yeah, so I think for me, I think the thing that I'm really interested in is all around kind of diversity and inclusion. I mean, specifically in beauty, because I'm a global beauty analyst, but, I know that this crosses over in other categories too. But I think over the last kind of year or so, we've seen some really interesting developments from various different brands and companies. So, we've seen Unilever getting rid of the word normal from packaging and advertising to stop implying that there's unnormal, if that's the correct term. You've got Degrees, the world's first inclusive deodorant. We've got affordable innovation starting to come through in beauty. So between partnerships with brands like Zara and Joe Loves is a great example of making kind of luxury products accessible at a lower price point. So you've got all these different layers of inclusivity coming through in beauty. And one that I think is particularly interesting is what we've seen in skincare is lots more products specifically designed for darker skin tones coming to market. And I think there's definitely an argument within that is a direct result of some of the, noise and conversations that were started around the time of the Black Lives Matter, and the fact that, as a result of that, retailers have given these kind of brands dedicated shelf space. There's much more opportunities. So as a result, we've seen this kind of flurry of launch activity. And I think that's, really positive, and it's really great. So I think it's a nice positive note, but also I think there's still a long way to go. So I think looking ahead as we go into next year, I think what's going to be really interesting is how that kind of continues and we start to see more and more of that, hopefully. So I think coming back to the idea that there's definitely space to kind of cater to disabled consumers more. I think the World Health Organization estimates that around 15% of the global population, so 1 in 7 people, have some kind of disability. And in reality, there's not that many brands speaking to those consumers. And there's so many kind of simple tweaks and changes to things like products that brands can do to be more inclusive. So things like tactile markers on packaging, still incredibly niche. Store design in retail is not designed for, everybody. And, I've presented to various different clients on this topic, and you try and find exciting or interesting things that brands and retailers are doing, and there's not very much. There's learnings to be taken. I think Starbucks has, signing stores, which all of its, staff, know how to use sign language, but that's again, it's still so niche. So I think it's one of those things where I think there's still so much space and opportunity. There's so much you can do. And I think, as I say, I've only touched on disability side of it there, but I think it's a never ending task. And I'm really excited to see how it continues, especially, as I say, because we've seen so much development in the last couple of years. So I think it's going to be really exciting, and hopefully we'll see more development of that continue.
Yeah, how much progress have we made is a kind of question I'm thinking about as I listen to you speaking. And I remember, obviously back in 2020, certainly a lot of banks came out with these massive commitments around investing in diversity, equity and inclusion. I remember Chase in particular, huge investments. And they recently again said that they were going to invest even more money. I guess, the question is what's happened to all that money, right? I guess, did it really go to the right place, and has it made a difference? It's definitely a question on my mind.
Yeah, because that's another angle of it as well, is that it's that idea of, bringing in, what you're doing as a business internally as well. So all the stuff that's behind the scenes. So you can do really great campaigns, really inclusive and diverse, because that's one thing we've definitely seen in beauty for, many years. But actually are those brands standing up to that and making sure that their workforce is, similarly diverse, and they're supporting that diversity in the right ways. So I think that's again another interesting frontier, so to speak, that I don't think we've fully we're certainly not fully there yet, but as I say, hopefully we'll keep progressing.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the progress that's made next year as well in this. Again, I think it's a really good topic to think about where we are now and where we'll go, because I actually think in the same where we just spoken about sort of sustainability topic just then, and in sustainability we always talk about the say-do gap, like where companies say they're going to be sustainable and how are they doing it. I actually think that applies right now to inclusivity and diversity. There's a lot of talk around, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do whatever. And it's not to say that talk is cheap and people aren't doing anything, but I just feel like the action needs to catch up now. We need to see that authentic movement being taken, I think, when it comes to these things. I mean, I love some of the examples, like the degree example, the deodorants and all that. I mean, the advertising behind that and the actual product sampling and things like that. They're absolutely brilliant. There's another beauty company called Grace Beauty as well, which has all these like color cosmetics for which make it easier for people to hold, depending on, again, if you have different sort of motor skills or different sort of differently abled when it comes to sort of doing sort of your mascara and things like that. So I love these sort of movements which don't shout about it as much, but it's just there. And I think that's the best message to be getting across now. It's the actual doing rather than talk. I think we talk quite a good game. And in beauty, I can relate, Sam, obviously being a beauty analyst as well. But we've talked about beauty, 5 years ago. I remember there's big campaigns over skin tones and things like that. And when Fenty Beauty came out, it was this big thing. And I do question how much progress we've actually made since 5 years ago. Like, it hasn't really accelerated as much as it should have. So I think it's a wonderful topic to really look at for next year as well.
Yeah, potential podcast material.
Yeah, check it out.
Taking notes.
And I think it's a really exciting space for brands to have a look at, because at the end of the day, design that's inclusive for everybody is ultimately the best design. Like, it just works best for everybody. If you think of the taps that, I'm going to act it out, but it's a podcast, so I don't know how to, the taps that you kind of pull up instead of turn and twist with your hand. They're made for people who can't, obviously, who don't have full use of their hands, but they're actually just a better tap. Or in McDonald's in India, they created this box that could be used by people with one hand, because that was an issue, so people could enjoy a Big Mac equally as well as people who had full use of two hands. But it turns out there's so many other different ways that you can use that box. You can, if you're driving a car and you want to eat a Big Mac, if you're doing something else, like, it's just a better design all around. So if you can incorporate inclusivity from the very start, I think there's just such an opportunity to make a better product all around for everybody. It
just makes sense to make your products and your website and everything about your brand much more accessible, right? I mean, even from a non sort of personal, sort of desensitized view, it makes more sense, right, to make your things as accessible as possible to people. So it kind of seems like a no-brainer. So I think it's as I say, a really interesting area to look at from what we've seen over the last year and last couple of years, but really interesting to look ahead for the next year as well and beyond, obviously. So another good topic.
Yeah, and I think it's one that can really, it instills a bit of kind of positivity around your brand. I think it's I think Gucci Beauty, I think one of their campaigns came out as one of the most popular campaigns from a beauty perspective. And, it's been, its campaigns are incredibly inclusive and diverse. So I think it's one of those things where you kind of garner that really nice positive sentiment as well from consumers.
Indeed. No, thank you very much for bringing that topic up as well, Sam. Which, before we move on to our lovely data quiz, I do realise that I can't get away without bringing a topic and doing a bit of work myself. So my topic that I brought up, I mean, you guys have all brought up really interesting topics that you're very knowledgeable on as well and talking about. My topic, I'm not going to say I'm an expert in, but I find fascinating the idea of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, going forward, and sort of stepping into that kind of crypto world. And I find them fascinating because I understand them. I do a lot of research into them. And in beauty, we have seen there's at least 4 or 5 beauty brands now that have stepped into this world. Shiseido, Givenchy, Elf, and I think Estee Lauder has gone into it as well with Clinique. They've all got these sort of NFTs that they sell to consumers, and it opens up this sort of collectible space. I think in the beauty space right now, I think beauty companies are kind of experimenting with this new technology. It's a new thing out there. It's interesting to look at. So it's interesting to see how this will develop. Is it just collectibles for people? I know, for example, that some of the NFTs, when you buy NFT, you actually then get physical products as well. So it's connecting that sort of digital piece with, and that collectible with actual product. They're not necessarily just, because obviously when you buy the NFT for the first tweet, for example, you own the first tweet, that one big thing. Whereas in beauty, what we've seen more of is, rather than having a limited edition, some of them are limited edition, but rather than having limited edition artworks, it's a case of there's actually an unlimited amount of NFTs you can purchase. It's just all about having a sort of a step into that brand. And I think that's currently where the beauty industry is playing with NFTs, and I believe in other consumer goods industries as well, where right now I think the value, because the value is always going to go up and down. Obviously, it's non-fungible, so it's only worth what someone's willing to pay, right? So that's what I find fascinating as well. It's kind of like you could spend all this money on something that is worthless, depending on who you speak to. I also think there's accessibility issues as well with getting people to tap into cryptocurrencies and things like that. There is a sustainability conversation as well around crypto that brings up the idea of how much energy is consumed by these types of technologies. So there's all these sort of challenges I think that the market faces. However, I'm still fascinated by why, I don't know if any of you actually maybe bought an NFT, but I'm fascinated as to why people are buying. And I think for brands right now, it's that connection with a brand. It's about that loyalty to a brand. It means you can buy into that brand. It shows like real support and real loyalty. I think if you have a consumer that's buying your NFT, it means you've made a real mark on this consumer, right? So it opens up that conversation and that connection and maybe a bit better with the consumers. I think that is kind of where we're seeing it go. But yeah, I am absolutely fascinated to see how this plays out, because like we started this conversation with Andrew talking about bubbles, and I do believe as well NFTs could well be that. It could well just be, it could be that bubble that bursts, and it could burst in 2022. You never know. But no, I find this whole topic.
I think it's a great topic, and I also have observed like more brands jumping in on this sort of bandwagon. I was reading in Ad Age the other day that Budweiser has just launched a whole series of collectible NFT. I went to have a look at the website. It was like sold out. I heard that Macy's launched a series of NFTs aligned with of its sort of iconic Thanksgiving Day parade balloons, but they did that all. That was interesting because they sort of tied it, because with these NFTs they get a cut when it gets sold on, and they've sort of connected that to charitable donations. So every time it gets sold on, they'll kind of continue to contribute to. I can't remember the name of the charity, but obviously, I think it's all obviously part of that crypto craze, Andrew, that you referred to. I saw some Mintel data actually the other day that said that I think it's around half of sort of millennial Gen Z saying they're interested in crypto, and that was up from like a third, not that long ago. And, so there's clearly this trend and this craze around it, but also at the same time, these are investments at a time when cash, we talk about inflation and volatility in the market, investing in other things other than, having your money in cash is obviously a good idea. We saw I think the highest I've seen, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the highest I saw was there was an NFT sold at Christie's for 69 million by the artist called Beeple, who's like a digital artist, and 69 million. And that was earlier this year. And then that kind of crosses over to this whole culture of crypto, because there's a credit card that was launched in the US, and they had a limited edition Beeple credit card, the design. So it's all kind of a part of the culture, part of the crypto culture, part of the craze. It's definitely a great topic to keep a close watch on this year. And, there's that investment angle as well, given that cash is being eroded by inflation.
Yeah, I really like the idea of kind of tying it to a cause. I feel like as somebody who doesn't fully understand it, so I don't think I might be buying into it anytime soon, but I feel like the examples that I've read up about are the ones that kind of stand out to me are the ones that are tying it to some kind of cause. So I think the Givenchy example is a good one, because I think theirs were tied to an LGBTQ plus charity. So it's almost like that idea of kind of creating a community around your brand, and also may have it's that idea of giving people that feel good factor from buying into these things, as well as so if that bubble does burst, then it doesn't entirely matter, because you've invested in a good cause, haven't you? So I think there's definitely interesting things that you could do there. And I think another great example that I thought was an interesting one from the beauty space was NARS's example. So tying it to their their iconic orgasm product. And essentially, I think what that did was almost like a tiered system. So they had your one that was free and so available to kind of everybody. So kind of democratizing access to these things. But then the prices went right up to kind of $500, and then were tied to products. And again, it was tied around that idea of creating that level of like brand loyalty and, creating that community around products. And as you both Andrews, I think, have mentioned it at some point, is that idea of kind of, if you've managed to convince consumers to buy into these things, then you've got a good brand there, definitely.
Do you just think it's fascinating that we've moved away from, collectibles are so inherently tangible, you would think, like they're a thing that you collect. And now we've kind of moved away from that tangibility aspect altogether. Like, what compels people, apart from obviously the investment angle, which makes sense. As a millennial myself, I'm heavily into cryptocurrencies because that's kind of the only place I can put my money at this point. But what else what does one do with it? Can you display it? Does it say something about you the way that a normal collectible would? I'm not really sure.
Well, I think that's the fascinating thing, isn't it? Because it is kind of like memorabilia and things like that. It's the authenticity, because the fact is you can buy this digital artwork, which can be shared and displayed again and again and again quite freely, depending on obviously the rights on that piece of artwork. But it's like the Mona Lisa or Starry Night or one of these great artworks that is we see it again and again reprinted and things. But it's the original. It's about having that actual original thing and having that sort of connection. So I think that's the fascinating thing. I also think I'm not sure if it was Givenchy when they moved into the NFT space, we're talking about how it merges this world, this crypto world, and it's not just about that audience now. It's about actually the luxury goods audience, because it's not just about entering crypto. It's also, well, actually now you own something, you own this thing, you're involved in this luxury goods kind of concept as well. So yeah, I am fascinated to see how it plays out. I'm fascinated to find out who of my esteemed colleagues will be the first to buy one. If indeed any of you, maybe you're all sitting there with secret NFTs that you have right now. Andrew's shaking his head, so that's potentially no.
Maybe we should do an NFT of this podcast.
Well, there you go. How do you do it? How can we sell it? How can you make millions? I would say, should we sell the first podcast? But I can't remember what that was. Should definitely have.
I can. Clean.
Oh, can you?
It was on the clean trend.
That will sell.
Yeah.
That will definitely sell. So, and maybe indeed this podcast will sell. But no, thank you very much for, I think, 4 very key talking points there, really, of what we're seeing now and what we're looking forward to in 2022. Before we end this podcast, this season, this year, I did promise a quiz. We are a data company. I can promise listeners that I haven't shared any details of this quiz with anyone. So this is a genuine quiz. But what I've done is basically gone over the last few months. I've just looked at some random consumer data points from different markets around the world. And I'll pose to you different questions, all for a bit of fun, just to see the responses that we get. So the first question I want to ask you is, I'm basically just going to give you a choice of 2. So you go, it's a 50-50 choice. It's from the Digital Trends report, or Digital Trends Consumer Data, which was a US consumer data survey that we ran. So very quickly, do you think more people would switch to electronic brands that are more environmentally conscious, or would more people pay for more sustainably made electronics? So would people switch to brands that are more environmentally conscious, or would they be more willing to pay for sustainably made electronics? Which one do you...
To pay more for.
You think pay more for? So you think pay more...
No, that was my question. So they want to pay more for. So yeah, I think the other one, the switch brands.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. So basically, yeah. Which one do you think consumers said was the high, was what they would do, or
so
willing to do more?
Or the thing.
Yeah, the brand being more environmentally conscious, or actually just having a more sustainably made and paying more for a more sustainably made thing.
I think the brand.
It is electronics. So I think electronics buyers are quite brand loyal, right? So maybe I'll switch it up and say pay more for a brand. I'm changing my mind.
There we go. See, it's a good quiz already.
Yeah, I know that's a tough one. I go for the opposite answer, that they'll pay more for items that are sustainably made.
And Alicia, do you want to lock in an answer?
No, I think I'm going to look in brand as well. I think, like Sam said, they are brand loyal, but also electronics have like an esteem and identity aspect to them. And I think that at the end of the day, a sustainable brand is probably more what people are looking for.
Okay, so in the US, 47% of consumers said they would switch to electronic brands that are more environmentally conscious. And US consumers that would pay more for sustainably made electronics, it was 44%. So actually the more environmentally conscious brand was the answer. I've specifically chosen tight data points.
That was a tricky one, but you started with a tricky one there, Andrew.
Well, another quick one, same report. So US consumers, digital trends. Do you think more people are more reliant on the internet since the pandemic, or more reliant on just their tech devices?
Internet.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with internet.
Tech devices.
Oh, Andrew, bucking the trend.
Yeah.
Should have gone with the ladies.
That's a change for no reason.
Second time in a row.
50.
I feel like it's the way you're wording the question. It kind of leads me in that direction, Andrew. It's something subliminal that you're like working on my psyche here.
Yeah, so 58% of people in the US say they're more reliant on the internet since the pandemic, and 56% are more reliant on tech devices. So again, still very close. I obviously chose.
And the reason I said it was because not everyone's connected, and so I thought, everyone's relying on their devices. Anyway.
So on to the next. I've chosen different consumer data now. So this is from the Chinese consumer tracker data from last month. So literally just the November tracker that's just been published for us now. And in that tracker data, we asked, I was very intrigued that we asked this question, but we asked, which of the following sports activities do you think is cool for females to participate in? So we asked it. I don't know why we asked it, but we asked this.
We asked that.
Yeah. So basically, I will give you the list of the options that we gave to the Chinese consumer.
Define cool.
Well, it just says cool in inverted commas. So that's what we asked. So I will give you the list, and then you just have to pick which sport you think they defined as the coolest, and then obviously whoever scores the highest wins. So the sports were boxing, cycling, equestrianism, fencing, rowing, shooting, skateboarding, skiing, soccer or football, triathlon, and weightlifting. So they were the options.
Obviously, right off the back of the Olympics.
Yes, exactly, yeah. But which of those sports activities do you think is cool for females to participate in? Which one do you think? It wasn't just women they asked as well. It was all Chinese consumers aged between 18 and 59. So which ones do you...
So what do men consider as well, women?
Yeah. So what was that? Sorry. What was the coolest out of that list? Did any stand out for you?
I'm trying to think back how well China did in the Olympics.
I want to say skateboarding. That was a new one for the Olympics. It was pretty cool.
I mean, skateboarding generally is pretty cool,
it's a cool thing to do.
This is probably from someone coming... Someone who's never learnt to skateboard. Maybe it's just an untapped desire. Maybe that's going to be my New Year's resolution.
So you think it's cool?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go for boxing.
Or should I pick a different one? I can't even remember them now.
Shooting, equestrianism?
Yeah. Equestrianism. Let's go with equestrianism. I'll go for a different one. Okay,
so equestrianism was 48%. So that's actually quite high.
I thought, honestly.
The highest was 56%. That was skiing. So skiing is the coolest according to Chinese consumers. So questions, Andrew, what one did you say?
Boxing.
Boxing was 27%. So a lower one. And then Alicia, what did you say?
I said skateboarding.
Skateboarding, that was 40%. So I think Sam has won that one there. Yeah. So yeah, skiing was the top. Second was shooting. With 51%, and fencing as well was also 51%. But without keeping score, I think Sam gets the points for that one.
Yeah,
I'm not completely sure.
Last minute change.
And then my last question is from our pub visiting data that we collected in the UK, of course. And this is going to be like a family fortune style. So I'm going to ask you the question and not give you any answers. And you just sort of say one answer and we'll see A, if people picked it, and obviously who scored the highest from there. So consumers in the UK on the pub visiting survey were asked, which of the following would encourage you to visit a pub or a bar more often? Well, I've said which of the following, and I can't actually give you the actual following. So of all I've messed up the question there, but of all the things, they were basically asked which things would encourage people to visit a pub or a bar. So for people in the UK asked at the end of 2021 in our most recent pub visiting report, what do you think consumers would have said would encourage them to visit a pub or a bar, given everything that's happened in the world as well? But what would you say would encourage people to visit a pub or a bar?
Football match.
A football match?
I was going to say food.
It's not up there. Football match is not up there. Food.
Good food.
So live sports, no?
No, live sports isn't. It may well be the way I've asked the question, Andrew. It's completely different. Because to be honest, I didn't mess it up to begin with.
Is this to compel them to pick one pub over the other, or just to go to the pub at all?
Yeah, what would encourage you to visit a pub or a bar? So what is in place that would make you think, I want to go to that pub or that bar? As I say, given everything that's happened.
Safety protocols, right?
There we go. Safety protocols would be up there. So COVID-19 measures, that would score you 38% of UK consumers would say they would go somewhere because there are social distancing or regular cleaning in play. So Alicia gets a point for that one.
I'll take it.
I'm also very aware that this is the last question and I've messed it up. So that's always it. That falls badly on me. Any other guesses?
I'm struggling.
Can I just list off the reasons I would go to a pub?
Yep.
Is there good beer on tap?
That again is not in the list. It is. Oh, the broad range of non-alcoholic drinks is in the list. Okay. So non-alcoholic drinks are in the list.
That does work for me at the moment. That's good.
That's why you go.
Or using an app
specifically for non-alcoholic drinks.
And using an app to order drinks as well is also, that was 20% of people said that was a reason to go to the pub for them. The top reason was just a convenient location close to my home. That was the 50% of UK consumers say that is what encourages them to go to the pub. Table service was number 2. Again, COVID related, but outside seating and quiet areas. Outside seating was 40% of people. 37% of people said they wanted quiet areas. And then finally, a family-friendly atmosphere for 32% of people.
Nice.
However, I do agree with you with the sports thing. So I may well have actually just asked you the question wrong there. So I may have done the data a disservice.
It's more around sort of...
yeah, it's more recent. Yeah, I was just thinking generally what would make you go to the pub. Food, drinks, music. Fun fact, I realised the other day that I've never lived more than 5 minutes from a pub in my entire life.
By design?
I mean, I had, like I say, it was a very late realisation, so...
Was it on purpose?
Isn't that everyone in the UK?
Apparently not. Lots of people were saying that they've been at least 20 minutes or up to 40 minutes from a pub. I've picked the wrong place to live.
You should have got a convenient location thing right then, Sam, to be honest. But yeah, so that wraps up our data quiz. I have no idea who won that. I obviously messed up the last question, so
I didn't win it.
I'm an absolute mess at this point. I'm going to say that as well. I'm going to say Alicia seemed like she won a lot of questions right, and I think Sam got a few right, and lives close to pubs, so she's obviously happy as well. So
she's a winner anyway.
Exactly. But yeah, no, thank you very much for that. And that kind of does it for today. Looking at the time as well, we have had a good conversation about many different topics. One quick thing I wanted to mention as well was the Spotify Unwrapped that everyone's been receiving over the last 2021, if indeed you do listen to Spotify. And there was some wonderful sort of snippets of information that we actually got from this podcast in that with regards to a huge amount of countries that are listening into us. So much insight over different episodes, as well as a real variety as well, with sort of the most listened podcast as well, which was really interesting to go into. Was there any from anyone that stands out that they would like to talk about? Just very briefly.
Yeah. It's amazing that we were at sort of up to 64 countries, listeners in 64 countries. That's pretty amazing. We had our first listener from Morocco. So I guess on behalf of all of us, thank you to everybody listening around the world. And our our followers were up 52% in the course of a year. So truly a global podcast. So thanks everyone for listening.
Yes, thanks indeed, and thank you all for joining me today for the festive podcast and for helping us get through this and what was quite a shambolic end to the quiz. So I do apologise for that. But hopefully those listener stats and that engagement with our audience will only increase for 2022. It kind of does it for today. It does it for this season. It does it for this year. Special thanks to you guys, our wonderful hosts, who will all be back in the new year with some great podcasts. Special thanks to all of the guests that we've had throughout this year. Special thanks to all of the listeners. Hopefully there'll be more opportunity for us to have more engagement with the listeners throughout the years as well. If you want to learn more about the podcast or Mintel in general, then please head over to mintel.com or to the Mintel platforms. Please get in touch. We're always wanting to hear more from people. And be sure as well to subscribe to Little Conversation wherever you get your podcasts if you don't already. But Andrew, Sam, Alicia, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season and a happy new year.
And you too.
And we will see. Oh, no.
You too.
Merry Christmas.
Of course.
Yeah,
Merry Christmas indeed. Merry Christmas
happy
indeed.
Christmas and Happy New Year.
Indeed. And we will hopefully be seeing everyone in the new year. So everyone have a great holiday and a great new year. Bye-bye.